For more than a year, I've been living in a body that no longer felt like mine. Crushing fatigue, heart palpitations, weight piling on without reason, cold spells that froze my bones, and clumps of hair slipping down the shower drain. My husband, Dr. Liam Ward, one of the most respected endocrinologists in Flagstaff, always had the same answer. Perimenopause, honey. You're overthinking again. He said it with a smile. The clinical, dismissive kind, then handed me another bottle of sleep aids or mild anxiolytics and told me not to stress myself sick. I tried to believe him. He monitored my labs, controlled my referrals, adjusted my meds. He told our friends I was just hormonal, that I'd be fine once things settled. But somewhere deep in me, a quiet alarm never stopped ringing. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching this story from, and hit follow on my channel.
Carolyn,
We believe life
situation is
never
far more
has
serious
just
than
one
you're letting
chapter,
on. We could lose
and sometimes
everything.
the most
understand the
important one
risks,
begins
but
at the
panic
very
won't help us
moment
now.
you think you've run out of options. Now, back to the story. My name is Carolyn Ward, and a little over a year ago, I stopped recognizing the woman in my own mirror. I was 38, a senior accountant at a small credit union in Flagstaff, Arizona. On paper, my life looked solid. A steady job, a cozy house on the edge of town, a golden retriever who adored me, and a husband everyone in the community trusted. My husband, Liam Ward, wasn't just any doctor. He was Dr. Ward, the endocrinologist people drove in from neighboring towns to see. He gave talks at health fairs, did interviews on local radio, and shook hands at charity 5Ks in a navy windbreaker with his name stitched over the chest. In public, he was all reassuring smiles and gentle metaphors about hormones being a symphony we just have to tune. At home, he still called me honey and kissed the top of my head when he walked past my chair at the dining table. And yet my body had started to feel like a slow, deliberate collapse. It began with the fatigue, not the I stayed up too late binge-watching Netflix tired. This was different. This was my body hitting a wall at 2 in the afternoon, like someone had yanked a power cord out of the wall. I'd be staring at a spreadsheet, numbers blurring, heart hammering, and then suddenly I'd feel gone, heavy, like gravity had doubled. My heart would flutter in my chest, then slam hard enough that I'd grab the edge of my desk. My weight climbed, even though I was eating the same way I always had. 15 pounds, 20, 30. I started buying loose cardigans and telling myself it was just winter weight. Even when May rolled around and Flagstaff warmed up, my hair thinned in clumps. I'd run my fingers through it in the shower and come away with strands wrapped around my knuckles. My fingers and toes stayed icy, even in Arizona sun. No matter how many socks I layered on, I'd still go to bed feeling like my bones were made of ice. Liam, I said one night, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at an article I'd Googled about hypothyroidism. This doesn't feel normal. I'm tired all the time. I can't think straight at work. My heart's doing weird things. It's Dillion. He leaned against the counter, microwaving leftover lasagna. He didn't even turn all the way toward me. Honey, we've talked about this, he said. You're almost 40. Perimenopause can start in your mid-30s. Hormones get messy. It's normal to feel off. But this doesn't feel like menopause. My voice sounded small even to myself. It feels like my engine is dying, he chuckled, the way he did when a patient asked if gluten was toxic. You're a numbers person, Liam said. You like control. You're anxious, so you catastrophize. You read an article, suddenly you're convinced you have every condition listed. He crossed the room and brushed a kiss over my hair. I ran your labs, he reminded me. Twice. You're fine. You're just stressed. And maybe a little dramatic. He said it lightly, but the words stung. I watched him as he opened the cabinet and took down a sample bottle, shook 2 pills into his palm. Take one of these at night. He slid the pill toward me with a glass of water. It'll help you sleep. Once you start resting better, you'll see the symptoms calm down. What is it? I asked, already knowing the answer. Low-dose anti-anxiety, he said. Perfectly safe. You trust me, right? Of course I trusted him. He was my husband. He was a board-certified endocrinologist. He knew everything about hormones, and I knew how to reconcile bank statements. Still, as I swallowed the pill, something in my chest tightened. My body is screaming, I thought. Why is everyone telling it to shut up? The episodes got worse. Sometimes I'd be in the grocery store and my heart would start pounding like I'd sprinted up 3 flights of stairs. My vision would go a little gray at the edges. Once, in the cereal aisle, my knees actually buckled and I grabbed the cart to keep from going down. At work, my hands shook so badly I'd hide them under the table in meetings. I made stupid mistakes in the ledgers. My boss, a kind woman who'd seen me at my sharpest, pulled me aside one afternoon. "Carolyn, are you okay?" she asked. "You've been off lately. You seem exhausted." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just hormones, perimenopause, apparently." She gave me a look of sympathy that made my throat close up. At night, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling my heart stutter and jump, I'd hear Liam in the bathroom brushing his teeth, humming under his breath. Sometimes he'd bring in another little orange bottle and set it on my nightstand. "Sleep now," he'd say, stroking my arm. "Stop Googling. It's not helping." If you knees. Every time I tried to insist that this was more than stress, more than getting older, he would tilt his head and give me that doctor look. Half patience, half disappointment. "Honey," he'd say, "you're spiraling. You need to trust the person who trained for this. You are not your worst-case scenario." It was so convincing that some nights I did wonder if I was going crazy. Maybe my brain was exaggerating. Maybe I was just ungrateful, fighting a husband who was doing his best. But there was also this thin, persistent thread of dread in me that wouldn't go away. In quiet moments, when the pills wore off and my thoughts felt sharp again, I'd catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Puffy face, dull eyes, hair thinning along my part, and I'd think, this is not just getting older. Something is wrong. The decision to see another doctor came from somewhere deeper than logic. It felt like survival. Liam had a 3-day endocrinology conference in San Diego. He hugged me at the door, suitcase in hand, smelling like his usual crisp cologne. "Take it easy while I'm gone," he told me. "You're always pushing yourself. Promise me you'll rest." "I will," I said, hugging him back. "Love you." "Love you more," he replied automatically. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I stood alone in the silent house, my heart beating too fast, palms clammy. For a few minutes, I just walked around aimlessly, picking up a mug here, straightening a stack of mail there. My mind was at war with itself. If you go, you're betraying him. If you don't, you're betraying yourself. I picked up my phone before I could talk myself out of it. My older sister, Hannah, had battled thyroid issues years ago. The doctor who had finally listened to her, who'd caught what others missed, was an endocrinologist named Dr. Adrian Cho in town. I scrolled through my messages until I found Hannah's old text with his number and website. My thumb hovered over the call button. My chest felt tight, like my ribs were closing in. If Liam finds out? And then, clear as a bell, another thought cut through the noise. If you don't find out what's wrong, and soon you might not be here to worry about what Liam thinks. In that moment, something shifted inside me. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that my fear wasn't hysteria, it was a warning. I called the number. "Endocrine Associates, this is Marcy," a woman's voice answered. "Hi," I said, my own voice shaking. "My name is Carolyn Ward. I'm having some thyroid-type symptoms. My sister is a patient of Dr. Cho's. Is there any way he could see me this week?" To his ire, there was some typing, a soft hum. "We actually just had a cancellation for tomorrow at 10:45, she said. "Can you make that?" "Yes," I said, almost too quickly. "Yes, I'll be there." I hung up, my heart racing for a different reason now. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I was going behind my husband's back, seeing a colleague he'd probably bump into at conferences. But beneath the guilt, there was something else I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Small, but real. Dr. Adrian Cho's office was in a low concrete building, not far from the hospital. The waiting room was bright, with big windows looking out onto a parking lot dusted with pine needles. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. When the nurse called my name, I followed her down a hallway lined with framed degrees and diagrams of glands. My palms were sweaty. My heart ticked in my chest like a nervous metronome. Dr. Cho was in his early 50s, with silver at his temples and a calm, steady way of moving. He shook my hand, then sat across from me at the desk. "So," he said, "tell me what's been going on, Miss Ward." I told him everything. The exhaustion, the weight gain, the cold intolerance, the racing heart. I told him about forgetting simple words at work, about feeling like I was walking through molasses every day. I hesitated before mentioning Liam. Part of me wanted to downplay his role. Part of me wanted to scream. My husband is, well, he's an endocrinologist too, I finally said. He's been running my labs. He says it's perimenopause. He keeps prescribing anti-anxiety meds. Dr. Cho's pen paused over the paper. His eyes flicked up, studying me. Your husband is an endocrinologist, he repeated. What's his name? Dr. Liam Ward, I said, staring down at my hands. There was a tiny beat of silence in the room, longer than seemed polite. When I looked up, I saw it. The faint tightening around Dr. Cho's eyes, the way his jaw flexed once. He knew Liam. Everyone in their circle did, but he didn't comment. He just nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Let's not assume anything. I'd like to run a full thyroid panel, TSH, free T4, T3, antibodies. Also some cardiac markers, given your palpitations. We'll get blood drawn here and see what we're dealing with. He sent me down the hall to the lab, where a phlebotomist with lavender scrubs and a tattoo of a sunflower drew several vials of my blood. I tried to focus on the sting of the needle, on the smell of the alcohol swab, instead of on the pounding in my chest. By the time I was back in the exam room, Dr. Cho was already looking at something on his screen. His brows were knitted. That was fast, I said weakly. We can run a stat panel on some of these, he said. Given your symptoms, I didn't want to wait days. He swiveled the monitor slightly, so I could see. Carolyn, he said, his voice quieter now. Your TSH is extremely elevated. Your free T4 is almost non-existent. This isn't mild hypothyroidism. This is severe, chronic underactivity of your thyroid. What does that mean? I asked, though some part of me already knew. It means, he said, that your body has been operating in a state of significant hormone deficiency for a long time. We're not talking about a subtle shift with menopause. We're talking about gland failure that should have been aggressively treated. My skin prickled with cold, even as a flush crept up my neck. I thought Liam ran my labs, I whispered. He said everything was in range. Dr. Cho's jaw muscles ticked again. Do you have copies of those labs? He asked. I shook my head. Liam had always kept his charts in his system, insisting it was easier. I see, Dr. Cho said. He stood. Given what I'm seeing, I want to perform an ultrasound of your thyroid gland right now. He dimmed the lights and moved behind me, rolling the ultrasound machine closer. Cold gel touched the front of my neck. I stared at the ceiling tiles while he slid the probe across my skin, watching the black and white image on the screen. Silence stretched. He adjusted the angle, pressed a little harder over the right side of my neck. His face changed. The neutrality slipped, replaced by something sharper. Concentration, yes, but also alarm. My heart thudded in my ears. What? I asked. What do you see? He didn't answer immediately. He moved the probe again, narrowing in on an area on the right lobe. Do you see this? He finally said, angling the screen slightly toward me. All I could see were shades of gray, but he pointed to a region that looked different from the rest, more mottled, with irregular, darker streaks. This area here, he said. The tissue looks fibrotic, scarred. This isn't the usual pattern we see with autoimmune thyroid disease. It looks focal, almost like there's been targeted damage. Damage? My throat felt tight against his gloved hand. From what? That, he said slowly, is exactly what we need to find out. He wiped the gel from my neck and turned the lights back up. When he faced me again, his expression was serious in a way that made my stomach drop. I'd like to do a fine needle aspiration biopsy on that area, he said. Today, if you're okay with it. A biopsy? The word made my hands go clammy. Is this cancer? We don't know yet, he answered plainly. But your labs and the ultrasound both show significant abnormalities that can't be brushed off as normal aging. This tissue looks like it's been directly injured. I need to see what's in there. I nodded, trying to swallow past the tightness in my throat. He explained the procedure, how he'd numb my neck and use a thin needle to collect cells. I barely heard him. My thoughts were spinning. Directly injured. By what? By who? The biopsy itself was quick and strangely surreal. I lay there, staring at a poster about diabetes complications, while a needle slid in and out of my neck. My fingers clenched the edges of the table. Afterward, a bandage covered the spot, and I sat on the exam table with a sore throat and a pounding heart while Dr. Cho spoke softly into his phone, asking the lab to rush the analysis. "Carolyn," he said finally, sitting back down across from me, "I need you to hear this clearly. What I'm seeing today is not a case of you being dramatic or anxious. Your thyroid has been failing for some time. Your labs are dangerous. Left untreated, this can lead to serious cardiac issues, cognitive decline, even myxedema coma in extreme cases." My vision blurred. I blinked hard. "Why? Why would Liam say everything was fine?" I whispered. Dr. Cho's eyes were kind but unflinching. "I don't know," he said. "But something here doesn't add up. Until we get your biopsy results, I want you monitored more closely. I'm admitting you to the hospital for observation and to start proper thyroid hormone replacement." "Today?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Today," he said. "And one more thing, Carolyn." He paused, choosing his words. "Depending on what that biopsy shows, we may be looking at evidence of an experimental compound in your tissue. If that's the case, and you did not consent to any form of clinical trial or off-label treatment." He met my eyes. "Then we're not just talking about malpractice. We could be talking about a crime." The word hit me like a physical blow. Crime. My mind flashed back to every injection Liam had ever given me in our kitchen. "Vitamin boosters," he'd said. Every time he'd insisted on handling my labs, every time he told me I was overreacting. A low ringing started in my ears. My hands started to shake. In that moment, I realized that the worst-case scenario floating in the back of my mind, that my husband was missing something, might not be the worst after all. The worst-case scenario was that he knew exactly what was happening to me, because he had caused it. The room they gave me at Flagstaff Medical Center smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Through the window, I could see ponderosa pines and a strip of blue sky. Nurses moved in and out, checking my vitals. One of them hung a bag of clear fluid and connected a pill form of thyroid hormone to my medication schedule. A few hours later, a woman in a navy blazer with a hospital badge knocked and stepped in. She had dark, tightly coiled hair pulled back into a bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Ward," she said, "I'm Detective Renee Hall with the Flagstaff Police Department. May I come in?" My pulse jumped. "Yes," I said, sitting up a little straighter. She took a small notebook and a voice recorder from her bag, then pulled a chair up to my bed. "Dr. Cho contacted us with some concerns," she said. "Before we proceed, I want to be clear. You can stop this interview at any time, but if what he suspects is true, you may be the victim of a serious criminal offense." The words "criminal offense" swam in the air between us. Did he tell you what he found?" I asked. "He shared that there are signs of significant focal destruction in your thyroid," she said, "and that your biopsy may reveal an experimental compound called XG271. That compound was part of a clinical trial some years back. Its use was halted because of severe adverse effects. XG271. I repeated the name in my head, storing it away like evidence in a mental file. "I never signed up for a trial," I said. "I never even heard of that drug." Detective Hall clicked on the recorder. "Miss Ward, I'm going to ask you a series of questions," she said. "To start, aside from routine blood draws, have you ever received injections or treatments from your husband related to your thyroid or hormones?" I thought of the syringes Liam kept in the kitchen drawer. The energy shots. He'd given me some evenings. He gives me what he calls vitamin boosters once a month," I said slowly. "Says they help with fatigue. He told me it was B12. I never saw the labels." "Where does he administer these injections?" she asked. "Right here." I touched my thigh. "In my hip. The upper leg." She scribbled notes. "And before your symptoms began, did you ever have any procedures on your thyroid?" she asked. "Anything involving sedation?" A memory slid into place with sickening clarity. 3 years ago," I said. "He said I had a small thyroid cyst. He recommended a fine needle aspiration. He insisted on scheduling it at his clinic instead of the hospital. He said he'd be more comfortable there." I remember. They gave me something through an IV. He called it a little something to take the edge off. "Do you remember being fully unconscious?" Detective Hall asked. Not like full surgery, I said. But fuzzy. I went in, and then I just remember waking up with a sore throat and Liam telling me everything went great. She wrote more. And do you know if your husband's clinic ever participated in any clinical trials involving XG271? She asked. I shook my head, anger bubbling under my fear now. Liam talks about research all the time, I said. He loves being on the cutting edge. But he never told me anything specific about that drug. Okay, she said. One more question for now. When your symptoms started fatigue, weight gain, palpitations, how did your husband respond? Beyond what you've already told me. He kept telling me it was perimenopause, I said. He told me I was overreacting, that I was too attached to feeling in control. He put me on anti-anxiety meds and told me to stop reading medical sites. That sounds a lot like gaslighting, she said quietly, making you question your own perception of your health. I felt tears sting my eyes. I blinked them away, but one slipped down my cheek. I thought he was frustrated, I said. I thought I was being needy. He'd sigh and say, "Honey, I have real sick people to worry about. You're fine." And I believed him. He's the doctor. I'm just me. Detective Hall's gaze softened, but her voice stayed steady. Miss Ward, she said, if lab analysis confirms XG271 inches your thyroid tissue and we can connect that to a batch registered under your husband's control, then we're looking at potential charges of aggravated assault, unlawful human experimentation, and possibly attempted homicide, depending on the degree of risk to your life. My body went cold, colder than my chronically freezing hands had ever felt. He knew that drug was dangerous? I whispered. It was pulled because it caused permanent gland destruction in animal and early human studies, she said. It also contributed to life-threatening arrhythmias. No licensed practitioner could claim ignorance. So my voice broke. He took a drug that shuts down the thyroid and put it in mine. She nodded once. Grim. In that moment, I thought, I finally understood that this wasn't just neglect or a bad judgment call. It was something calculated. She asked for the names of any staff who were there the day of my old procedure, any times Liam had drawn my blood at home instead of sending me to a lab. I gave her everything I could remember, my mind replaying the last 3 years with horrifying new clarity. When she left, promising to keep me updated, I stared at the white hospital ceiling and tried to reconcile 2 images. Liam, the man who brought me coffee in bed on Sundays and joked about my spreadsheet brain, 9 disorder, and Liam, the doctor who may have secretly injected my thyroid with a drug designed to destroy it. The second image was starting to look more real than the first. The biopsy results came back the next morning. Dr. Cho came into my room with a folder in his hand, his face drawn. How bad is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He sat at the edge of the bed, that same calmness about him. But now there was anger beneath it, not at me, I realized, but for me. The pathology report confirms extensive fibrotic damage in the sampled tissue, he said. More importantly, chemical analysis shows residual traces of XG271. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the sheets. So it's definitely there, I said. In me. Yes, he said. There is no medical reason for that compound to be in your body, especially not after its trial was halted. Can my thyroid recover? I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me the answer before he said it. The damage appears irreversible, Dr. Cho said gently. Your gland has been essentially crippled. With proper hormone replacement, we can manage your metabolism, your energy, your heart rate, but your thyroid itself won't function normally again. My chest constricted. Grief rose up, sharp and unexpected for an organ I'd never thought about, for the version of me who hadn't yet been sabotaged. And the arrhythmias? I asked. We'll monitor your heart, he said. Prolonged severe hypothyroidism can have lasting effects, but catching this now gives us the best chance of preventing catastrophic complications. He paused. I won't sugarcoat it, he added. If this had gone on much longer at this severity, you could have gone into heart failure. You were not just a little tired. You were dangerously ill. I thought about the nights I lay awake, wondering if I was dying, and how Liam had laughed and said I was being melodramatic. A hollow laugh escaped me, jagged at the edges. "Dr. Cho?" I said. "Can I ask you something? Not as my doctor, but as a person?" "Of course," he said. "How does someone like him do this?" I asked. "How does a doctor take an oath and then weaponize his knowledge against his own wife?" His gaze softened, but there was a hardness there too, directed somewhere far beyond my hospital bed. "I don't know Liam the way you do," he said, "but I've seen physicians who let their ego override their ethics. They start to see people as systems to control rather than humans to serve. Add in power, fear, maybe greed." He shook his head. "It can twist a person." For the first time, I thought. I realized I might never get the why that would make this feel logical. There was no version of this story where Liam came out looking like anything but a monster in a white coat. Before he left, Dr. Cho squeezed my hand briefly. "We're going to treat your body properly now," he said. "And whatever happens legally, you are not crazy. You were right to trust your instincts." His words landed deeper than any lab result. By the second day, my heart rate had settled somewhat, my thoughts a little less foggy. The nurses checked in on me with the kind of gentle competence that made me want to cry with relief. In the late afternoon, my hospital phone rang. The number on the tiny screen was unfamiliar, but the prefix was local. "Hello?" I said. "Miss Ward, this is Dr. Barnes from the hospital lab," a man's voice said. "We've completed an additional analysis of the compound in your biopsy. I'm also here with Detective Hall." My stomach knotted instantly. "We traced the batch number embedded in the XG271 markers," he continued. "Each vial of the compound during its trial was tagged with a unique identifier. The one we found in your tissue corresponds to lot XG271A14. He paused, and Detective Hall's voice came on the line. "That lot," she said, "was assigned to a clinical trial that ran partly through your husband's clinic 3 years ago. According to the documentation we obtained, all remaining vials from that lot were marked as destroyed under Dr. Liam Ward's signature." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Destroyed," I repeated dully. "Except it's in me." "Exactly," she said. "We now have a direct link from a compound that was supposed to be disposed of to the tissue in your thyroid. Combined with your description of being sedated for a cyst aspiration and the monthly injections, this gives us probable cause to pursue criminal charges." "What kind of charges?" I asked, though I already knew it would be bad. "For now," she said, "aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury, unlawful human experimentation, and felony tampering with medical products. Depending on further expert testimony regarding your long-term risk of death, the DA may add attempted murder." The words echoing through the phone didn't feel real. I stared out the window at the pine trees swaying in the wind, thinking of the nights I'd lain on our couch while Liam watched sports, my heart stuttering in my chest. He had looked over at me, brushed my hand, and said, "You worry too much. You're fine." He had known. My voice shook when I spoke again. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Detective Hall said, "we document everything. We'll need your consent to search your husband's clinic and your home computers. We're going to look for logs, emails, financial records, anything that can establish motive and a pattern of conduct." "I'll sign whatever you need," I said. "Take whatever you want. Just don't let him do this to anyone else." "You have my word," she said. When I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the black TV screen across the room. Pale face, bandage on my throat, eyes that were tired but, beneath all of it, fiercely alive. "Why did he do this?" I whispered to myself. "Why wasn't I enough?" There was no answer. Just the steady hum of machines and the faint beep of my own heart monitoring its way into whatever life came next. I was discharged on the 3rd day with a stack of prescriptions and appointments. As soon as I stepped into the crisp Flagstaff air outside the hospital, I knew exactly where I was going. Not home, to Liam's clinic. Detective Hall had told me I had legal permission to access certain parts of his practice as a cooperating witness. There would be a formal search later, she said, but time mattered. If Liam suspected anything, he could try to destroy evidence. The waiting room at his practice was painfully familiar. I'd dropped off coffee here 100 times, kissed him in the hallway before he saw his first patient. The receptionist, a young guy named Nate, looked up as I walked in. "Missus?" "Ward," he said, startled. Hey, I thought you were, I thought you were sick. I was, I said. I'm here to grab some paperwork, Detective Hall requested. She should have called ahead. He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, she did. Said you could access his office. He's not here though. He's still out of town. Good, I said quietly. I walked down the hall, my footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Liam's office door was closed. For a moment, I just stood there, hand on the doorknob, feeling my pulse in my throat. Then I turned the knob and went in. The room smelled like his aftershave and printer ink. His diplomas lined the wall in neat rows. On the shelf behind his desk sat our wedding photo, frozen in time. Me in a white dress, him in a navy suit, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. The image felt obscene now. I moved to the corner where his small floor safe sat. My hands trembled as I knelt in front of it. He'd always joked that accountants make good safe crackers. But you don't need the code, he'd said. You've got me. I knew his safe combination anyway. Liam was sentimental. Everything important in his life was tied to dates. The code here was the same as the PIN on our joint checking account, our anniversary in MMDDYY form. My fingers punched it in before I could second-guess myself. The lock clicked. Inside were thick binders, a black leather notebook, and several folders. I pulled out one binder labeled Controlled Substances and Investigational Products Log. Flipping through, I found page after page of carefully dated entries. My eyes scanned until I landed on a date 3 years back. There. XG271A14. Quantity received. Quantity used. Quantity destroyed. Initialed and signed in Liam's bold, confident handwriting. He had signed off on every vial as disposed of in accordance with protocol. I took out my phone, hands shaking, and snapped photos of the page from multiple angles. The numbers blurred briefly through my tears. The office door opened behind me. I turned, heart leaping into my throat. It wasn't Liam. It was Mia Keller. I knew her from holiday parties and the occasional barbecue we'd hosted, 20-something, freckles, ponytail. She worked as a lab tech at the clinic, always quick, always smiling. Today, she looked startled, standing in the doorway in her blue lab coat, a small white stick clutched in one hand. "Mrs. Ward?" she said, her voice high with nerves. "Ma'am," I thought. "Liam said you were resting at home." My gaze dropped to what she was holding. A drugstore pregnancy test, its tiny window showing a faint but unmistakable second line. For a moment, all the air left my lungs. Mia noticed my gaze and flushed, instinctively trying to hide the test behind her back. It's nothing," she stammered. "It's personal." I also noticed the bracelet on her wrist, a slim silver bangle with a tiny engraved infinity sign. I knew that bracelet. Liam had given me the exact same one on our 5th anniversary. A wave of nausea rolled through me. "That's a pretty bracelet," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "Where'd you get it?" She hesitated, blush deepening. "It was a gift," she said finally. From someone special." My chest tightened further. The room felt too small. A voice floated down the hallway, a woman in her 60s, I guessed, from the timbre. "Mia," she called. "There you are." An older patient appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed, curly gray hair pulled back in a clip. She wore scrubs, top and jeans, a hospital badge clipped to her belt. Her belly curved outward in a way that, once, would have made me smile. "Sorry to bother you, honey," the woman said to Mia. "But I just wanted to say thanks again. If it weren't for you and Dr. Ward, I'd never have gotten that mortgage approved. He really went to bat for me with the bank. And now," she patted her stomach, beaming, "we're finally getting that little brother or sister for my son." Her words slammed into me like a truck. Mortgage. Helped her buy a house. Another baby. For a second, I thought I might actually pass out. Mia's eyes darted to me, then back to the woman. "Mrs. Diaz, maybe we can talk about this in the lab," she said quickly, guiding the woman away. I'll come in to check your labs in just a minute." "Sure, sweetheart," Mrs. Diaz said, oblivious. "I just wanted you to know how grateful I am. Some men say they'll help, but Dr. Ward really shows up. For you and that little boy of yours. And soon this one too." She winked, then shuffled down the hall. The hallway seemed unnaturally quiet as Mia closed the office door again. When she turned back to me, She was pale, eyes wide. She started. How many secrets does he have? I asked softly. How many families? Her lips trembled. I don't know what you mean, she said, but her voice sounded thin even to herself. I took a step toward her, gripping the binder so hard the cardboard dug into my palm. Is that Liam's baby? I asked, nodding at the test she still clutched. Mia's eyes filled with tears. She pressed the test to her chest like a talisman. He said you couldn't have kids, she blurted out. He said you'd already gone through menopause, that the doctors told you pregnancy would be dangerous. He said you were unstable, that you needed him too much, that he was just waiting for the right time to end things. My heart clenched so hard it hurt. Answer the question, Mia, I said, my voice hoarse. Is the baby his? She stared at me for a long moment. Then, finally, she nodded, tears spilling over. And the little boy, I asked, throat closing. How old is he now? 4, she whispered. Ben. He's 4. Liam. He said he didn't want to confuse Ben while things were complicated at home. So we told him his dad works in Phoenix. That's why he's not there all the time. For a moment, my vision blurred. I saw myself sitting across from Liam at our kitchen table, begging to talk about IVF, about adoption, about something. We just can't afford kids right now, he'd said. It wouldn't be fair, I won. Meanwhile, he was apparently paying mortgages, tuition, and God knows what else for another family. Anger rose like a tide inside me, hot and steady. Mia, I said, my voice low. Did you know anything about the XG271? About what he did to my thyroid? Her brows furrowed in confusion. What? She asked. X what? The drug, I said. The experimental compound they found in my biopsy, the one he was supposed to destroy. She shook her head violently. No, she said. He never told me about that. He just said you were sick, that your body couldn't handle pregnancy, that you were depressed, and that staying married to you was killing him. She hiccuped on a sob. He told me he was protecting you, she whispered, and us. For the first time, I saw her clearly not just as the woman my husband had slept with, but as another person he'd lied to, carefully and consistently. How old are you, Mia? I asked quietly. 26, she said. He'd started this with her when she was barely 20 and I was 34. A girl and a woman orbiting the same manipulative sun. Behind us, the muffled buzz of the front desk intercom crackled. A male voice, it sounded like Nate at reception, spoke quietly, but in the silence, his words carried. Yeah, Dr. Ward, he said. She came in about 20 minutes ago. Your wife. She went straight to your office. Mia's with her. My stomach flipped. Liam knew I was here. I had seconds. I grabbed my phone and quickly snapped more photos, not just of the XG271 page, but of several other suspicious entries. Lot numbers, initials, dates. Mia, I said, stuffing my phone back into my pocket. Detective Hall is going to want to talk to you. She's not your enemy. He lied to you too. Mia wiped at her cheeks, the pregnancy test still in her hand. What's going to happen to my son? She whispered. To this baby? If he goes to prison, how am I supposed to raise them alone? Her fear pierced through my own rage. I pictured a little boy with Liam's green eyes staring out a window, waiting for his father to visit from a city he didn't actually work in. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But whatever happens, you deserve to know the truth, and so do they. The security guard appeared at the end of the hall, shifting uneasily. Mrs. Ward? He called. I just got off the phone with Dr. Ward. He says you're not allowed back here without him present. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. That's fine, I said. I'm done here. I squeezed past him, the binder's weight still a phantom in my hands even after I put it back in the safe. The photos were on my phone. The reality was in my bones. In the parking lot, I leaned against my car and dialed Detective Hall. Detective? It's Carolyn, I said when she answered. I found the drug logs. I have pictures. And there's more. A lab tech. Her name is Mia Keller. She has a 4-year-old son with Liam, and she's pregnant again. There was a pause on the line. That would explain motive, Detective Hall said quietly. Thank you. Don't confront him alone if you can help it. We're in the process of securing warrants for a full search of the clinic and your home. Too late, I said, staring back at the glass door. He already knows I was here. Well, I hung up and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, head resting against the steering wheel. The life I thought I had: polite dinner parties, shared retirement plans, inside jokes about mutual patients. That life wasn't just cracked, it was gone. What was left, though, was something fierce and unfamiliar. The part of me that had called Dr. Cho, that had opened the safe, that had looked Mia in the eye and asked for the truth. That part wasn't going to lie down and die. Our house felt unfamiliar when I finally walked back in, as if someone had rearranged the air itself. It was clean and tidy, just like always. The kitchen counters gleamed. The couch pillows were fluffed. The little ceramic bowl by the front door still held my keys and a pile of stray coins. But now I saw it differently. This wasn't a sanctuary. It was a stage set, a carefully curated backdrop for a man who had been conducting an experiment on his own wife. I went straight to Liam's home office. His personal desktop computer hummed quietly on the desk. The chair still had the faint indentation from where he sat late into the night, charting and researching. My hands moved almost without thought as I woke the monitor. The lock screen came up with a prompt for a password. 3 tries before it locked me out. I knew his patterns. Dates, always dates. The hospital's zip code, his mother's birthday, our wedding date, our dog's adoption day. I tried his mom's birthday first. No luck. Our anniversary. Wrong again. On the 3rd try, I typed in the date he matched into his endocrinology residency, a day he never shut up about. The screen unlocked. Of course, I thought bitterly. The most important day of his life. The desktop was unnervingly organized. Folders with names like research articles, CME, credits, billing, photos. One folder stood out. New Roots. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a second. My heart pounded. Then I clicked. The folder opened into a grid of thumbnails, photos. The first one I enlarged was of Liam at Disneyland, baseball cap backward, grinning at the camera with a little boy in a Spider-Man t-shirt on his shoulders. The kid's hair was the same russet brown as Liam's, their eyes identically green. Then, I thought numbly, another photo. Liam and Mia at the Grand Canyon, standing at the railing, the sunset turning the rocks orange behind them. She was kissing his cheek. He had his arm around her, hand resting on a small child's head just at the edge of the frame. There were more. Christmas mornings around a tree I'd never seen, birthdays with balloons, a beach trip with matching towels. With each image, a piece of my chest seemed to splinter. I clicked into the subfolder labeled Docs. There were PDFs of mortgage paperwork for a small house across town. The buyer listed as Mia Keller. The co-signer, Liam Ward. Bank statements with monthly transfers. $3,000, $4,000, labeled as support. Health insurance policies for Ben, in which Liam was listed as primary. It was a whole other life, funded by the money he'd said we needed to be careful with whenever I brought up vacations or fertility treatments. I opened the folder labeled Emails. It contained exported message threads, years' worth, between Liam and Mia. At first, they were mundane. Schedules, patient reports, silly memes. Then the tone shifted. "You looked incredible in that dress today," Liam wrote in one. In another, a few months later, "Don't worry, baby. I told you, I'm handling it. She's so exhausted now she barely leaves the couch. A little hormone adjustment was all it took. I'm still the hero husband who makes her tea." My skin crawled. I scrolled. "Her labs are sliding exactly the way I planned," he'd written in a thread dated 18 months ago. "TSH is climbing. T4 is in the basement. She thinks it's just stress. When her thyroid finally gives out, I'll be the poor, overworked spouse who tried everything. Judges eat that stuff up in divorce court." I had to clamp my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. Farther down, a message from about a year ago. "You and Ben are my real family," he wrote to Mia. "Everything else is just obligations I made before I knew what real happiness was. Once her gland is toast, we'll have the perfect narrative. I stayed as long as I could, but her illness was too much. People will feel sorry for me, not her. We keep the house. We keep the practice. We keep everything." My vision went red at the edges. In that moment, I finally understood that nothing about this had been impulsive. He hadn't made one terrible decision in a moment of stress. He had built a strategy, brick by brick, using my body as the foundation. I forced myself to keep scrolling. There were jokes about my hair falling out. She blames the shampoo, he'd written once. Can you believe that? Sometimes I feel bad for her. Then I remember she was never meant to be a mom. He had written those words about me, the woman he married, the woman who had once sobbed into his chest about a negative pregnancy test, like I was a failed experiment. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the mouse. I swallowed bile and opened a spreadsheet he'd titled Projections. It was a financial model. On one tab, post-divorce scenarios. On another, reputation risk mitigation. He'd literally assigned probabilities to different outcomes, with notes like, if C develops overt cardiac complications, high sympathy factor. Preposition narrative her refusing treatment. My stomach churned. I grabbed a USB drive from his desk drawer, the one he used for presentations, and plugged it into the tower. I copied the entire New Roots folder, photos, emails, financials, the whole rotten structure. When the transfer bar finally hit 100%, I yanked out the drive and slipped it into my pocket. The house phone rang, its shrill sound making me jump. I picked it up with numb fingers. Hello? Miss Ward, it's Detective Hall, came the measured voice. We just secured a warrant for your house. My team will be there first thing in the morning to seize digital devices. In the meantime, please don't delete or move anything on his computer. We need to preserve the chain of evidence. I looked at the glowing monitor, the open email thread where Liam talked about my failing thyroid like a stock he'd shorted. I've already copied a folder called New Roots to a USB, I said. I didn't change anything else. But you'll want to see this. That's okay, she said. Bring the drive when we meet. We'll verify the contents. How are you holding up? How was I? My thyroid was shot. My marriage was a lie. My husband had a secret child and another baby on the way with a woman he was grooming as his next real family. And yet, under the shock and nausea, there was a strange new steadiness. I'm not okay, I said honestly. But I'm done being quiet. Good, she said. Stay somewhere safe tonight. And Carolyn? Yes? You did the right thing calling Dr. Cho, she said. And you're doing the right thing now. I thanked her and hung up. The front door opened. Hey, honey, Liam called out, his voice bright and familiar. I grabbed you some tulips from that little stand on Milton. I know you love the purple ones. My heart slammed against my ribs. Of course he'd come home early. The clinic had called him. He knew I'd been there. I quickly closed the financial spreadsheet, but left the email thread open, the one where he talked about taking care of me with a little endocrine adjustment. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small plastic specimen container. Dr. Cho had given me a sealed tube with a tiny piece of gray tissue suspended in clear solution. Proof, he'd said. Not just in the records, in your hand. I held it now, my fingers digging into the hard plastic. Liam's footsteps grew louder in the hall. My breathing sped up. My skin buzzed with adrenaline. You can still play dumb, a scared part of me whispered. You can give him a chance to explain. No. Something deeper answered. He had 8,000 chances. This is yours. The office door swung open. Liam stepped in, bouquet of tulips in one hand, suitcase still by the doorway behind him. He looked tan, relaxed, the picture of a thoughtful husband cutting his trip short to check on his fragile wife. Carolyn, he said, stopping short when he saw me in his chair. What are you doing on my computer? His eyes darted to the screen. I watched in real time as his brain registered his own words glowing there in black and white. Once her gland is toast, we'll have the perfect narrative. The color drained from his face. The tulips slipped from his hand and hit the floor, petals scattering across the hardwood like small, bright casualties. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt, but my voice came out steady. Hi, Liam, I said. Welcome home. For a second, the only sound in the room was the quiet whir of the computer fan. Liam's eyes flicked from the monitor to my face, then to the small container in my hand. Okay, he said, slowly, carefully. Okay. Carolyn, I need you to take a deep breath. You're clearly upset. I stood up, keeping the container between us like a talisman. Upset? I repeated. That's an interesting word for, found out you've been poisoning my thyroid for 3 years while building a second family across town. He flinched, but recovered quickly. He always did. You don't understand what you're looking at, he said, taking a step into the room. Those emails, they're out of context. And that drug, whatever Cho thinks he found, it's part of an advanced protocol. You're not trained to interpret this stuff. I'm not trained, I said. But I know how to read plain English. Once her gland is toast, we'll have the perfect narrative. Pretty sure that doesn't require a medical degree to decipher. His jaw clenched. That was a horrible joke, he said. Dark humor. Doctors cope in messed up ways sometimes. You, of all people, know my sense of humor. You used to joke about the way I organized our spice rack, I said. My voice shook with fury now. Not about slowly destroying an organ in my body. He moved closer, reaching toward the keyboard. Let me just close this, he muttered. We can talk calmly without reading things out of context. I stepped back, keeping myself between him and the desk. Don't touch anything, I said. Detective Hall has a warrant. She's coming in the morning. They already know about the XG-271, the batch number, the destroyed vials that weren't actually destroyed. For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. XG-271 was experimental, he said quickly. It had promise. I was ahead of the curve. You should be thanking me, Carolyn. I've been managing your hormones in ways most doctors don't have the guts to. Managing? I cut in, my voice rising. You crippled my thyroid. I'm going to be on replacement hormones for the rest of my life. My heart could have stopped. You did that while calling me hysterical and pushing anti-anxiety meds, so I doubt my own body. His expression hardened, resentment sliding over his features like a mask snapping into place. You were difficult, he snapped. Always second-guessing, always reading things online, and panicking. You said you didn't feel ready for kids. You said you were terrified of your body turning on you. I solved it. My hands were shaking, but I held the container higher. You didn't solve anything, I said. You turned me into a lab rat without my consent. You stole my ability to ever know what my body might have done on its own. He lunged suddenly, trying to grab the container from my hand. Instinct kicked in. I jerked back, my shoulders slamming lightly against the bookshelf. Give it to me, he hissed. You're going to break the chain of custody. You have no idea what you're doing. This could ruin everything. Dine. That's the point, I shot back. Everything deserves to be ruined. We stood there, breathing hard, staring each other down. For the first time in 15 years, I saw him without the soft focus of love. His face looked sharp, cruel. Not the man who'd held my hand at my father's funeral. The man who'd calmly watched my body fall apart and called it overreacting. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. A firm knock rattled the half-open front door. Flagstaff Police, a voice called. Dr. Ward? Miss Ward? This is Detective Hall. Liam's head snapped toward the sound. His face went pale again. You called the cops? He whispered, almost incredulous. No, I said. I called for help. There's a difference. Detective Hall stepped into the office doorway, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. She held a folded piece of paper in one hand. Dr. Liam Ward, she said, her tone formal. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize any electronic devices and documents related to XG-271 and your treatment of Miss Ward. We also have a warrant for your arrest on charges of aggravated assault, unlawful human experimentation, and tampering with medical products. Liam laughed, a harsh sound. You can't be serious, he said. I am a respected physician. I've saved lives in this town. You're going to arrest me based on my wife's paranoia and the word of a rival doctor? Davelis. We have lab confirmation of XG-271 inches her thyroid tissue tied to a batch you signed as destroyed, Hall said evenly. We have documentation from your clinic logs with your signature. And Miss Ward has provided emails in which you describe intentionally allowing her gland to fail to generate sympathy in a future divorce proceeding. She nodded at the open monitor. One of the officers stepped forward to photograph the screen. You can, of course, remain silent, she added. But anything you say can and will be used against you in court. You don't understand, Liam said, rounding on me in a last-ditch attempt to reassert control. Carolyn, tell them. You knew we were trying unconventional methods. You asked me to help you with your hormones. You said you didn't want kids in this state. I was protecting you. I stared at him, my throat tight. I asked for help, I said. Not for you to play God with my endocrine system. Not for you to gaslight me until I thought I was crazy. And definitely not for you to build a new family while using my illness as your exit strategy." He shook his head, desperation bleeding into his tone. "This is crazy," he said. "You're sick. You've been sick for a long time. You're not thinking clearly." "Detective, my wife has always been emotionally fragile. This isn't—" "Liam." A new voice cut through his rant. We all turned. Mia stood in the doorway now, pale and shaking, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other clenched around her phone. She must have followed the police cars when they left the clinic. Tears streaked her cheeks. "Stop," she whispered. "Just stop." "Mia, go home," Liam snapped. "You don't need to be here." She shook her head. And in that small movement, I saw something break free in her too. "The guard called and said the police were here," she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to fill the room. "He said they were asking about XG something. About a trial. About Carolyn. I didn't know, Liam. I swear to God, I didn't know you made her sick." He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "This is complicated science. You wouldn't You told me she was infertile," Mia cried. "You said she was born that way. You said you stayed with her out of pity, because she couldn't help it. You said we were your real family. You said once things were settled, you'd file for divorce, and we'd all move in together." Her words hung in the air, damning and raw. Detective Hall's pen scratched across her notepad. "Miss Keller," she said gently, "would you be willing to come down to the station later and give a formal statement?" Mia nodded jerkily, her shoulders shaking. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll tell you everything. I don't want my kids to grow up thinking this is love." Liam looked between us, his wife with the evidence in her hand, his pregnant girlfriend with tears in her eyes, the detective with a warrant. For the first time since I'd known him, he seemed small. The arrogance drained away, leaving something hollow. "Carolyn," he said, one last attempt, his voice suddenly soft. "We can fix this. I can find you the best specialists. We'll say it was a misunderstanding, a research miscommunication. Don't throw away 15 years over." "Over what?" I asked. "Over you secretly destroying my thyroid and planning to use my illness as a PR move?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I don't love you," I said quietly. "I don't even know who you are. And if I did nothing, if I stayed quiet, you'd do it again. To someone else. Maybe to them." I glanced at Mia's stomach. Her hand followed my gaze, protectively. Officer Ramirez stepped forward with handcuffs. "Dr. Ward," he said, "please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Liam's gaze flicked to mine one last time. What I saw there wasn't love or remorse. It was fury, wounded ego, fear of consequence. "Fine," he spat. "Enjoy your little victim narrative, Carolyn. You always did like attention." The cuffs clicked around his wrists. Detective Hall read him his rights as the officers led him out past the scattered tulips, through the living room where we'd once decorated a Christmas tree, and out the front door into the bright Arizona afternoon. I stood there, breathing hard, listening to the sirens start up down the street. I felt empty, hollowed out, and under the emptiness, a thin, stubborn line of relief. The man who'd been slowly killing me from the inside was finally out of my house. The next months were a blur of appointments, interviews, and court dates. Flagstaff is not a big town. Word traveled fast. Before the trial even started, local news anchors were saying phrases like "alleged medical abuse" and "doctor accused of poisoning his own wife" over footage of our house, of the clinic, of Liam, in an orange jumpsuit, with his hands cuffed in front of him. There were days I wanted to shut it all off, crawl under a blanket, and let someone else tell my story. But every time I thought about backing out, I remembered the way Liam had talked about my thyroid in that email. Once her gland is toast, we'll have the perfect narrative. He'd tried to write my story for me. The least I could do was take the pen back. The county courthouse was an older tan building with a metal detector at the entrance. On the day of opening statements, the hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with reporters, patients, and curious onlookers. Inside, I sat in the front row beside Detective Hall and the prosecutor, my palms damp against my skirt. The bench under me was hard, the air faintly stuffy. I could feel people's eyes on the back of my head. At the defense table, Liam sat in a suit, looking smaller somehow. The tan from his conference had faded. His hair wasn't as neat. He still had that doctor's posture, though, shoulders back, chin lifted just a little higher than seemed necessary. His lawyer, a man in an expensive tie with a voice made for juries, leaned over to murmur something in his ear. Liam's jaw clenched, but he nodded. When the judge, a woman named Karen Doyle, with sharp features and tired eyes, called the court to order, my heart rate spiked. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of my necklace against my collarbone, a small grounding point. The prosecutor began with a clear, measured voice. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said, "this case is about trust. The trust we place in doctors, the trust we place in spouses, and what happens when one man decides that those forms of trust are not sacred, but exploitable." She laid out the case piece by piece, the XG 271, the faked destruction logs, the experiment gone rogue inside my thyroid. Every fact felt like a hammer blow against the version of reality Liam had built. When it was time for witnesses, Mia went first. She walked to the stand in a simple dress, her pregnancy more pronounced now. She couldn't quite look at me, but when she raised her right hand to swear to tell the truth, I saw something firm in the set of her jaw. "Miss Keller," the prosecutor said, "how did you meet the defendant?" "He was my boss," she said, voice trembling at first. "I was hired as a lab tech at his practice when I was 22. "And when did your relationship become romantic?" the prosecutor asked. "About a year after that," Mia said, eyes dropping. "He told me his marriage was basically over, that his wife was emotionally unstable, that they didn't live like a couple anymore." "Did he tell you anything about his wife's health?" the prosecutor asked. "He said she was born with some genetic problem," Mia said. "That she could never have kids. That pregnancy would be dangerous. He said he stayed with her out of duty." "And did you and Dr. Ward have children together?" the prosecutor asked. Mia nodded, tears filling her eyes. "A little boy," she said. "Ben, he's 4, and—" she glanced at her stomach. "This one," the prosecutor nodded gently. "Did Dr. Ward ever talk about leaving his wife?" she asked. "All the time," Mia said. "He said he was just waiting for the right story. That if he left while she seemed healthy, people would judge him. But if she got sicker, if she couldn't manage her own life, he could say he'd tried his best and people would feel bad for him." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Did he ever mention XG 271, or using any experimental treatments on his wife? The prosecutor asked. "No," Mia said, shaking her head. "He just said her body was failing on its own, that he was doing what he could." The defense attorney tried to paint Mia as bitter, a scorned mistress looking for revenge. He brought up her financial dependence on Liam, her fear about supporting 2 children alone. But every time he tried to twist her words, Mia came back to the same simple truth. "I didn't know," she said. "If I had known he was hurting her on purpose, I never would have stayed." Next, they called Dr. Cho. He walked to the stand in his usual calm way, wearing a simple gray suit. The prosecutor took him through my symptoms, the labs, the ultrasound, the biopsy. "Dr. Cho," she said at one point, "in your expert opinion, could Miss Ward's condition be explained by natural menopausal changes?" "Absolutely not," he said. "Her thyroid hormone levels were catastrophically low. Untreated, this could have led to life-threatening consequences. To suggest this was simply women's hormones changing is medically indefensible." He explained XG 271's known effects, the way it destroyed thyroid tissue, the halted trial, the letter from the FDA warning practices against further use. "And is there any legitimate standard of care that would justify injecting this compound into a patient's thyroid without explicit informed consent?" the prosecutor asked. "No," he said firmly. "None." The courtroom was silent. Then came the forensic toxicologist, who detailed the chemical signature of the compound in my tissue and how it matched the batch assigned to Liam's clinic. A digital forensic expert confirmed the authenticity of the emails and documents from Liam's computer, explaining how metadata proved they weren't fabricated. "Could these emails have been created after the fact to frame the defendant?" the defense attorney asked. The expert shook his head. "The creation and modification dates, server logs, and backup traces all indicate these messages were authored over several years by the defendant's account," he said. "There is no evidence of tampering." Finally, it was my turn. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking into blinding light. Even with the air conditioning, I could feel sweat prickling along my spine under my blouse. I raised my right hand, sworn in, then sat. The wooden chair creaked softly. "Miss Ward," the prosecutor said, her voice gentle. "Can you tell the jury how you first realized something was wrong with your health?" I told them about the exhaustion, the weight gain, the hair loss, about my fingers going numb while I keyed in numbers at work. I told them about sitting at the kitchen table while Liam told me it was just perimenopause, how he'd pushed bottles of anti-anxiety meds across the wood, how I'd swallowed them, and then cried in the dark because I didn't recognize myself. I described the night in the grocery store aisle when my heart had felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest, and how Liam had laughed later when I told him I thought I might have been having a heart issue. "You love drama," he'd said, and I'd believed him. As I spoke, I saw jurors' faces soften. A woman in the front row wiped at her eyes. I told them about calling Dr. Cho in a moment of quiet rebellion, about lying on the ultrasound table, staring at the ceiling as he said the word injury in connection with my thyroid. And in that moment, I told the jury, I realized I had a choice. I could keep believing my husband, who benefited from me staying sick and confused. Or I could believe the doctor whose face actually showed concern when he looked at my lab results. I chose to believe concern. The prosecutor nodded, then asked me to describe the day I opened the New Roots folder. I did, in as much detail as I could manage without my voice breaking completely. The Disneyland photos, the mortgage papers, the emails about my gland being toast. "How did reading those messages make you feel?" she asked softly. "It felt like someone reached into my chest and turned off a light," I said. "Not just the light for my marriage, the light for every truth I thought my life was built on." I paused, breathing through the ache behind my sternum. "He wasn't just neglecting me," I added. "He was strategizing my decay." The defense attorney tried to rattle me, suggesting that I had resented Liam's success, that I might be exaggerating the pain to punish him. "Miss Ward," he said, "is it possible you're misinterpreting your husband's dark humor in those emails? Doctors can be graphic when they vent with colleagues." I looked at him, then at the jury. "Humor is when you make a joke and everyone can walk away," I said. "What he did to me doesn't end when the punchline does. I wake up in it every day." When I stepped down from the stand, my legs were trembling, but I felt lighter in some essential way. I had said it out loud, all of it. Liam chose not to testify. His lawyer said it was to avoid a media circus and respect the scientific complexity of the case. I suspected it was because he knew his arrogance would bleed through, and arrogance doesn't play well in front of a jury you've just scared half to death. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for several hours. I sat in the hallway with Detective Hall and Dr. Cho, sipping lukewarm coffee from a vending machine, staring at the scuffed tiles. Every time the door to the jury room opened, my heart shot into my throat. Finally, the bailiff called us back in. As we stood, my knees felt weak. I caught Dr. Cho's eye. He gave me a small nod, the kind that said, "Whatever happens, you're not alone in that chair anymore." The jury filed back in, the foreperson, a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt holding a folded piece of paper. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Doyle asked. "We have, Your Honor," he said. "On the count of aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty," he read. My lungs released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "On the count of unlawful human experimentation without consent?" "Guilty." "On the count of tampering with medical products with reckless disregard for human life?" "Guilty." I do. Each word landed like a gavel, even before the judge spoke again. She called Liam to stand, though he barely lifted his gaze from the table. "Dr. Ward," Judge Doyle said, "you violated not only the law, but the most basic trust a patient and a spouse can place in another human being. You weaponized your knowledge and your marriage. This court cannot and will not minimize that." She sentenced him to 6 years in state prison. She permanently revoked his license to practice medicine in Arizona and reported the case to the national database so he couldn't simply move and start over. She ordered him to pay damages and to assume lifelong financial responsibility for my ongoing hormone replacement therapy and any related cardiac care. His lawyer murmured about appeals, about misinterpretation of complex research. But even they seemed hollow now. When the bailiff led Liam away in handcuffs, he didn't look at me. I watched his back as he disappeared through the side door. A man who once thought he could orchestrate everyone's ending, now having his own written for him. I felt no satisfaction in that moment, just a quiet, exhausted kind of justice. A year later, I barely recognized my life. My body still bore the permanent marks of what Liam had done. Every morning, I lined up my thyroid pill next to my coffee mug, swallowing it 30 minutes before breakfast like clockwork. My heart still skipped sometimes in ways that made me sit down and breathe, but the constant bone-deep fatigue had eased, thanks to proper treatment. My thoughts were clearer. The world had color again. I no longer lived in the house Liam had once filled with lies. I'd sold it, with the court's blessing, and moved into a smaller place on a quiet street with a big maple tree in the yard. The first night I slept there, the silence felt different, like a blank page instead of a cover-up. Dr. Cho Adrian, as I'd learned to call him outside the exam room, remained my endocrinologist. Somewhere along the line, he also became my friend. He checked my labs, adjusted my doses, and texted me stupid memes when court dates loomed. We started grabbing coffee after my appointments, then dinner on nights that were heavy with medical what-ifs. He didn't rush anything. He didn't push. He just showed up, consistently, quietly. One evening, months after the sentencing, we sat on my new couch. A movie paused on the TV because we'd gotten sidetracked talking about childhood memories. I used to think my job was just numbers and hormones, he said, smiling. Now I realize it's half science, half being a witness to people's lives falling apart and coming back together. Which half am I? I asked lightly. He studied me for a second. You, he said, are the part that proves sometimes the coming back together can be beautiful. My chest warmed. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like I was an obligation or a statistic. It felt like I was a person. Somewhere in that gentle, slow unfolding, we fell in love. Not the dizzy, high-stakes falling I'd felt with Liam in our 20s. This was quieter, steadier, built on all the ways he had sat with me in my worst moments, without flinching. Around the same time, I started volunteering with a local organization that supported kids in the foster care system. It began as a way to put my pain somewhere useful. I organized donations, balanced their books, hosted bake sales. One Saturday, they asked for volunteers to hang out at a community center where kids waiting for placement could play games. That's where I met Stella. She was 7, with wild brown curls and eyes too old for her small face. She sat off to the side, coloring furiously, while other kids played ping pong or video games. I sat down a few feet away. "What you drawing?" I asked softly. Without looking up, she shrugged. "Trees. Those are pretty good trees," I said. "Mine always look like green lollipops." That earned me a tiny snort. We started talking. About her favorite books. About how she hated when people talked to her in baby voices. About how she'd been in 3 different placements in 2 years. "They always say it's not my fault," she said, pressing hard enough with the crayon to almost rip the paper. "But I'm the one who keeps leaving." Her words landed deep. I remembered how it felt to have your whole life yanked out from under you and be told it was for the best. "Stella," I said gently, "the grown-ups messed up, not you." She shrugged, eyes still on the page. "You don't know that," she said. In that moment, I realized I wanted to show her, prove to her, with more than words, that some people stayed. The process of becoming her foster parent, then her adoptive mother, wasn't quick or simple. There were home studies, classes, interviews. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was strong enough to be someone's safe place while I was still rebuilding my own. But the first time she slipped her small hand into mine during a court hearing, leaning her head against my arm as if it was the most natural thing in the world, something in me clicked into place. Motherhood hadn't come the way I'd pictured it. My body hadn't carried Stella, but my heart had been waiting for her longer than I knew. "Mom?" she said one night, quietly testing the word in the dark hallway. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, sweetheart?" I answered, flicking on the bathroom light for her. She smiled, a small, fierce thing, and for the first time, there was no doubt in her eyes about whether I'd still be there when she came back. On the day Adrian and I got married, the Arizona sky was clear and bright, the kind of blue that makes everything else look sharper. I stood in front of a full-length mirror in a simple ivory dress, my thyroid scar a faint line on my throat. My body was a map of everything I'd survived, And for once, I didn't feel the urge to hide any of it. Adrian stood behind me, straightening his tie, catching my reflection's eye. "Your labs looked perfect last week," he said. "Half doctor, half fiancé. TSH right in the sweet spot. I'm fully authorized to say you are medically cleared to dance tonight." I laughed, the sound surprising me with how light it was. In that moment, I thought, I realized that being seen, truly seen, is the best medicine there is. There was a knock at the dressing room door. "Can I come in now?" a small voice called. "Get in here, kiddo," Adrian said, opening the door. Stella barreled in, wearing a white dress with a ribbon sash, a basket of white rose petals hanging from one arm. Her curls had been tamed into something resembling order, but a few rebellious strands still framed her face. "Mommy," she gasped, seeing me. "You look like a princess, but also like you. Does that make sense?" "It's perfect sense," I said, kneeling down to her level. She touched the fabric of my dress with reverent fingers, then looked up at Adrian. "Adrian," she said, still insisting on his first name most days. "Are you ready? The lady said it's almost our turn." "I'm ready if you are," he said, offering us both an arm. We walked down the short hallway together, me, my daughter, and the man who'd first met me as a patient and chosen, over and over, to also see me as a whole person. The ceremony was small. A few close friends, some co-workers from the credit union, the director from the foster agency, dabbing her eyes in the second row. Detective Hall sat quietly in the back. Our eyes met for a second, and she gave me a little nod. She'd once told me that most of her cases ended in paperwork, not weddings. As we reached the end of the aisle, Stella stepped ahead of us, scattering petals with great concentration. The sunlight streamed through the windows, catching in the floating white edges. Adrian squeezed my hand. "You okay?" he whispered. I looked at the rows of chairs, at the simple arch with a few strands of greenery, at my daughter's small, determined back. I thought about the woman I'd been a year and a half ago, cold all the time, exhausted, believing that sickness and confusion were just my new normal. I thought about the night I sat alone in our old kitchen, heart pounding, and decided to pick up the phone and call another doctor. The moment I opened Liam's computer, the click of the USB drive, the feel of the specimen container in my hand. I thought about hospital ceilings and courtroom benches, about every time I'd felt like my body was a problem and my voice an inconvenience. Then I looked at the man beside me, the girl in front of me, and the life I was walking into. "I'm more than okay," I said softly. "For the first time, I actually feel safe." The officiant spoke words I barely heard. Vows were exchanged, simple ones, about showing up, about telling the truth even when it was hard, about never using the language of care to mask control. When Adrian slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands were steady. For the first time, I realized, I understood that love isn't the absence of fear. It's the presence of someone who stands there with you, even when fear walks in. I have not way. After the ceremony, while our small group of guests moved toward the reception area, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the courtyard. The air smelled like pine and faintly of the catered tacos someone was setting up. I stood under the big maple tree, feeling the rough bark at my back, listening to the distant murmur of voices and Stella's laughter. In front of me, life stretched out: routine blood tests, school drop-offs, arguments over bedtime, mortgage payments. Nothing glamorous, nothing cinematic, but deeply, profoundly mine. I thought about Liam, somewhere in a cell, likely already spinning a version of events that made him the misunderstood genius, and me the ungrateful wife. Once, that thought would have consumed me. I would have spiraled, imagining how he was telling the story, wondering if people believed him. Now, it felt distant. He could tell whatever story he wanted. I knew the truth. And more importantly, I was living it. I ran my fingers over the faint scar on my neck, feeling the slight ridge of tissue. This body had been tampered with and underestimated. It had also carried me through hell and out the other side. A small hand slipped into mine. "Mom," Stella said, leaning against my hip. "Are you sad today?" I looked down at her, at the worry in her eyes. "No," I said honestly. "I'm just remembering. Sometimes the memories hurt, even when you're really happy." She nodded, as if she understood more than any 7-year-old should. "I remember my old house sometimes, she said. The bad stuff. But also the good stuff. Like the way the light came through my bedroom window. Is that weird? No, I said. That's just being human. She thought about that, then smiled. Well, she said, this house, you and Adrian and me, that's my favorite one. Something inside me melted in the best way. I squeezed her hand. The greatest act of love, I thought, is the fierce protection of your own truth and of the people you bring into it. I'd lost a husband, a home, and the life I thought was waiting for me. I'd gained a scar, a pill bottle, and a file full of court documents. But I'd also found something I hadn't even realized I'd lost years ago. My own voice, my own intuition, a man who respected both, and a little girl who called me Mom in a tone that left no room for doubt. The sun dipped a little lower. Inside, someone turned up the music. I heard Adrian call my name. Come on, sweetheart, I said to Stella. They're not allowed to start the party without us. We walked back inside together, hand in hand, petals from her basket still caught in the folds of her dress and in the lines of my palm. Life can be brutal. It can strip you down to the rawest version of yourself. But if there's one thing my thyroid, my heart, and my entire messy journey have taught me, it's this. Even after someone you love tries to extinguish your light, you can still rebuild the fire. You can still listen to that small, stubborn voice inside that says, "This is wrong, get out." You can still stand up in front of strangers and say, "This happened, and it wasn't okay. Let's be Darius." And if you keep moving forward, even one shivering, hormone-wrecked step at a time, the sun does come up again. Sometimes, it rises over a courthouse. Sometimes, over a small rental with a maple tree. And sometimes, like today, it rises over a room full of people who know your scars and choose you anyway. That, more than any verdict, is my justice.